I assume you'll be cleaning out your desk by noon. That was the very first sentence Malcolm ever said to me. Not, hi, I'm the new CEO. Not, thanks for keeping this place alive through the merger. Just that. Like I was an old pizza box stinking up his shiny new condo. My name is Brenda. 16 years at Corvex Dynamics. I built more of that company than any person whose name ended up on the website. But in that moment, standing in the doorway of my own office with a stranger in an expensive suit measuring where his ego would fit, I did what women like me are trained to do. I smiled. I nodded. I handed him the new hire handbook. The one I had writ. He didn't notice the sarcasm. They never do. Before I tell you how his entire world caught fire, do one thing for me. Tell me in the comments, which city and country are you watching from? And if you've ever had a boss like Malcolm, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story, because some of you need to hear how this ends. Malcolm flipped through the handbook like it was a menu, and he was allergic to half the ingredients. So your operations? He asked, eyes already drifting to my whiteboard. Senior Systems Operations Manager, I said. I built the internal automation workflows, escalation routing, analytics dashboards. Right, legacy systems, he cut in, already bored. We'll talk about modernization later. Legacy. That word stung more than I let show. Legacy systems were the reason we'd survived 3 market crashes, 2 lawsuits, and a merger so badly executed it should have come with a content warning. Legacy systems were also my code, my logic, my long nights and cold coffee. But to Malcolm, they were just old wallpaper he planned to rip down as soon as his interior decorator arrived. He moved into my office like he owned it, jacket on my chair, laptop on my desk, coffee ring directly on the only coaster I actually liked. The board speaks very highly of you, he said, which was corporate for, they told me you exist and I'm already wondering how to replace you. We're entering an aggressive growth phase. Synergy, scalability, forward momentum. He really said synergy out loud, with eye contact. I've heard, I replied. I read the merger documentation, twice. His eyes flicked up. For a second, I saw something flicker, annoyance maybe, or the realization that I wasn't one of those employees who just smiled and waited for memos. Well, he said, pushing off my desk like a man leaving a crime scene, we'll need builders, not caretakers. People who can keep up. That was our first meeting. He told me to clear out by noon. I went back to my desk and fixed a permissions bug in the billing system that had quietly saved his new revenue forecast from being off by $2.3 million. He never knew. 16 years. I joined Corvex when the company was 4 people, 1 server, and a rented room with a carpet so old it smelled like regret. I onboarded the first 3 sales reps, set up the first client database, wrote our first compliance checklist in a Word doc with Comic Sans headings, because nobody warned me it would still be in the legal archive a decade later. I built the client scoring algorithm before AI became the buzzword you slapped on anything that moved. I stitched together our internal workflow system with duct tape, Zapier, and pure stubbornness, until we were scaling faster than companies twice our size without hiring a single extra coordinator. If a contract renewed on time, my scripts had touched it. If an escalation landed in the right inbox with the right urgency flag, my logic had put it there. If the board crowed about best-in-class retention, that was my architecture humming quietly under the floor. I didn't wear a crown, but I built the castle. Then the merger happened. Ardent Tech came in with their sleek branding and their growth hack culture. The board smiled for photos, shook hands, and then announced Malcolm as the new CEO, someone who understands modern markets and speaks investor language fluently. Translation: we want a man in a very nice suit who looks good on stage. He walked through the building like an inspector, touching nothing, judging everything. These workflows feel dated, he said once, staring at a dashboard that had quietly prevented 3 compliance violations the previous quarter. They're stable, I replied, and documented. That's why we haven't been sued in 2 years. He smiled in that, I heard words not meaning way. We'll see what the strategy team says, he replied. They're coming in next week. The strategy team. That was what he called them. What I heard was a flock of consulting crows with fresh degrees and no memory of what it feels like when a system fails at midnight and you're the only one who knows where the logs live. Still, I didn't fight. Not yet. I watched. I listened. I took notes. Because you learn something, spending 16 years as the person E. Virion forgets until they smell smoke. People think power is in titles or corner offices or who talks the loudest in meetings. But when a company's entire nervous system runs on scripts you wrote, on logic you designed, on trust only you have earned, real power is knowing what happens when you leave. And Malcolm had no idea what would happen when he pushed me out. He was about to find out. Because the day he tried to erase me from the picture was the day he started erasing the only thing holding his shiny new empire together. And when the first crack appeared, it wasn't loud. It was a small missed alert. In a system he'd called overcomplicated. The kind of thing you only notice when it's already too late. The crack didn't look like a crack at first. It looked like a tiny blip in a status channel, one green checkmark missing from a sea of green. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Most people didn't even know that particular checkmark existed. But I noticed. Because I built it. Because it had never, not once in 16 years, failed. It was the automated escalation route for our biggest medical tech client. If something went wrong in their compliance timeline, my system flagged it, rerouted it, validated it, and notified legal before the client even realized anything was out of sync. It was our safety net. Our backbone. Our shield against lawsuits and catastrophic fines. And that morning, the alert never triggered. I sat at my desk, watching the dashboard flicker, trying not to let the dread settle into my veins. Someone had touched my architecture. Not modified. Not optimized. Not improved. Touched. Sloppily, carelessly, like a toddler poking a power outlet with a fork. I opened the log history. There it was. A permissions filter that had always routed compliance flags, first to legal, had been disabled. Not removed, just switched off. And not by accident. It required conscious effort. A name sat next to the modification. Ethan Bay. Strategy team. New hire. Zero institutional memory. Zero clue what thread he'd just yanked from the company tapestry. I exhaled. Slowly. Very slowly. Then leaned back just as Malcolm strutted down the hallway like a man performing confidence instead of feeling it. He paused at my desk. "Morning," he said, clearly pleased with himself. "Did you see the new process optimization proposal?" I nodded. I saw changes. He grinned. "Good, we need agility. Can't run a modern company on dusty workflows." Dusty workflows. The workflows that had quietly kept the company alive. The workflows he didn't understand. The workflows he hadn't bothered to ask about. "Let me guess," I said, "strategy team's idea." "Of course," he said proudly, "they're the future." I didn't reply. Because right then, not even 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A push alert. Not from Corvex. From the medical tech client. Urgent, need clarification on compliance delay. Deadline impacted. Call us immediately. My pulse went flat. Steady. Deadly. I stood up, not fast, not panicked, just certain. Malcolm was still hovering near the hallway when I stepped toward him. "Did you need something?" he asked, still in his fake Zen tone. "Yes," I said. "Your new agility team just triggered a compliance failure." His face twitched. "What?" "They disabled a filter that routed regulatory flags. The client's timeline is compromised." He blinked. Why would a filter matter? I almost laughed. Almost. "That filter prevents multi-million-dollar lawsuits," I said. "That filter prevents your quarterly review from turning into a funeral. That filter prevents the agency from shutting their operations down. That filter was the reason they trusted us." Silence. Real heavy silence. Then Malcolm forced a thin smile. We'll fix it, he said quickly. Ethan's team can. They can't, I said. They don't know what they touched. He didn't like my tone. His jaw tightened. People like him hate being reminded they're not the smartest in the room. We'll regroup, he said. Let me handle the client. I stepped back. Not submissive. Not intimidated. Just stepping back so I wouldn't say the thing burning on my tongue. You can't handle a coffee machine without supervision. That afternoon, the client escalated. Not through support. Not through ops. To the board. Malcolm blamed legacy processes. Which meant me. Of course. But the board wasn't stupid. They'd been around long enough to know the difference between a system failure and a human one. The strategy team had caused the failure. But Malcolm didn't care about that. He cared that I hadn't collapsed when he cut me out. He cared that I still had authority without a title. That night, as I sat alone at home with my laptop open, watching error logs multiply like infected cells, I realized something. They weren't just ignoring my work. They were erasing it. Slowly. Deliberately. But here's the thing Malcolm didn't understand. When you spend 6 years quietly repairing everyone else's mistakes, you learn exactly how the whole machine fits together. And exactly what happens when the wrong person pulls the wrong wire. And watching the wires spark that week told me something brutal and true. The collapse hadn't started. Not yet. But it would. Soon. The collapse didn't start with an explosion. It started with a meeting invite, no agenda. No context. No explanation. Just the digital equivalent of someone tapping a knife against a glass. Every instinct I had, every muscle memory earned from 16 years inside that building, told me something was wrong. Deep wrong. When I walked into the glass conference room, they were already there. Malcolm. The strategy three, Ethan, Tyler, and Jenna. And HR's newest recruit who still looked like she needed permission to breathe. Malcolm gestured at the chair across from him. I didn't sit. Not yet. Not until I understood the battlefield. Brenda, he began, we need to talk about your role. I almost smiled. There it was. The sentence every long-timer hears right before someone half their age tries to turn them into a footnote. Malcolm leaned forward like this was his dramatic moment on a prestige TV show. We're modernizing, streamlining, innovating, and to move fast, we need everyone aligned with the new direction. The new direction. The phrase that means, we've already decided what happens to you. I waited. Silent. Unblinking. Because silence unnerves men like Malcolm, men who need you to react so they can feel powerful. He continued. Your systems, well, he looked at Ethan for help. Ethan straightened, puffing himself up like he'd invented logic. They're not scalable, Brenda. They're manual, rigid, legacy. Honestly, we're surprised they lasted as long as they did. Interesting. The same systems he broke 2 days ago by pressing buttons he didn't understand. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. I let them keep talking. Because the more someone explains something that isn't true, the more truth you uncover. Jenna jumped in next. We're recommending a full rebuild, new workflows, new infrastructure, clean slate. A clean slate. The ambition of every inexperienced team who thinks systems run on vibes instead of logic. Finally, Malcolm slid a folder across the table. The offboarding folder. Termination packet. Signed by HR. Dated yesterday. Yesterday. Before the escalation. Before the client's call. Before any alignment meeting. This wasn't a conversation. It was choreography. A performance. A script they expected me to play my role in. Effective immediately, Malcolm said, tone soft but eyes sharp. We're eliminating your position. I didn't flinch. I didn't gasp. I didn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, I said one thing. Are you sure? His eyebrows twitched. He wasn't expecting that. Yes, he snapped, this is final. I reached into my bag. pulled out my badge, set it on the table gently, like I was placing a match on gasoline. "All right," I said. "Let's see how your next week goes." And then I walked out. No tears. No shaking. Just steady, deliberate steps past the people who once depended on me, but now pretended not to see me. But the moment I reached the elevator, I noticed something I hadn't expected. Malcolm and the strategy team weren't celebrating. They weren't relieved. They were nervous. Eyes darting. Whispers hissing. Because deep down, they knew. They'd touched wires they shouldn't have. They'd broken parts of the machine they didn't understand. They'd just fired the only person who knew where the backbone of the company lived. The elevator doors closed. My reflection stared back at me, calm, composed, but with a spark in my eyes I hadn't seen in years. Not fear. Not defeat. Recognition. They had made the biggest mistake people like Malcolm make. They confused quiet with weak, background with replaceable, stability with stagnation. But they were about to learn something the loud leaders never understand. When you erase the person who keeps the system alive, the system notices. The clients notice. The board notices. And eventually, the entire company notices. I didn't slam the elevator butt. I didn't power walk out of the building. I didn't sit in my car and cry like the script expected me to. I just stepped outside, breathed in the cold air, and let the truth settle in my bones. They had no idea what they'd just done. Not yet. But soon. I sat in my car for a moment, watching the building through the windshield. The same building I'd kept alive through mergers, lawsuits, system outages, product launches, and every late-night emergency that leadership never even knew happened. 16 years of silent disaster prevention, gone with a folder and a fake sympathetic expression. Fine. If they wanted to run the company without me, they were about to experience exactly what without me looked like. I pulled out my personal laptop, the one Malk Ohm didn't know existed, and opened my private diagnostic dashboard. Not illegal. Not hacking. Just the access no one remembered was tied to me because no one ever bothered to learn how the system was built. And right there, staring at me in flashing amber. 7 failures. 3 routing errors. 2 silent escalations. 1 flagged compliance breach. All within the last hour. I stared at the glowing screen and whispered, "Wow, you broke it even faster than I expected." See, Malcolm thought he'd fired an employee. But what he really fired was the human firewall. The one who patched the gaps. The one who fixed mistakes before they hit the surface. The one who saw every crack long before it reached the boardroom. Now the cracks had no one holding them together. Perfect. I closed the laptop, started the car, and drove away. Not home, just away. Somewhere quiet. Because chaos was coming, and I wanted the best seat in the house. By noon, my phone buzzed. A message from an ex-teammate. "Is it true, you're gone? Because everything is breaking." I didn't respond. Not yet. At 12:14 p.m., the medical tech client emailed again. Urgent, dashboard non-functional. Need immediate resolution. At 12:26. Escalation tickets not routing. Compliance deadline at risk. At 1:03. If we don't receive a fix by end of day, we must consider terminating our contract. 16 years of flawless partnership, now hanging by a thread because Malcolm wanted agility. By 2:40 p.m., Corvex's internal Slack lit up like a Christmas tree. Anyone know why reporting cluster is offline? Ops, anyone? Jenna broke something. No, Ethan did. Does anyone know how to revert this? Where is Brenda? I laughed. Out loud. In the parking lot of a Target, leaning on my steering wheel like a villain in a comedy. Because the irony tasted sweet. They spent months calling my systems clunky, rigid, legacy. They fired me for being slow and too cautious. And yet the moment I left, those same outdated systems rolled over, exposed every weak seam, and collapsed like a badly built tent in a rainstorm. Around 4:00 p.m., I got another message. This time from someone I didn't expect. The director of finance. Message. Hi Brenda. Do you have a moment? The forecasts are pulling incorrect data and leadership is confused. Confused. The corporate synonym for panicking. Still, I said nothing. Nothing at all. Because silence was the revenge they never planned for. By evening, 3 things had happened, exactly as I predicted. The compliance issue escalated to the board. The client demanded a formal review with legal. Malcolm called an emergency meeting to stabilize the environment. And here was the best part. They still didn't know why things were falling apart. They blamed glitches. They blamed the merger. They blamed the interns. They blamed everyone except the real cause. They removed the person who kept the entire skeleton standing. That night, I made myself a cup of tea, sat down on my couch, and thought about what would happen next. The system failures were just the start. The real collapse would happen tomorrow. And the day after that. And especially the day they tried to present numbers that didn't exist and projections based on algorithms they couldn't even locate. Because the next wave wasn't technical. It was political. The collapse didn't arrive with an explosion. It arrived with a whisper. The next morning at 7:12 a.m., my phone buzzed, not with panic, not with anger, but with dread. A text from someone I'd barely spoken to in months. Brenda, something is very wrong. Malcolm is losing it. Then another. Did you change the compliance flags before you left? Followed by, the CEO is demanding a full audit meeting in an hour. I took a slow sip of coffee. This was the part people never understood. When a company fires the backbone, the bones don't shatter loudly. They weaken quietly, then everything crumbles at once. At 8:03 a.m., my former teammate sent a third text. They can't find the architecture documentation. Everyone is blaming everyone else. I smiled into my mug. Of course they couldn't find it. Because I didn't keep it on a public drive. Or a shared folder. Or a corporate wiki the strategy team refreshed last month by deleting half the pages. I kept the documentation in my head. In my habits. In the thousands of micro decisions that leadership never saw, never valued, never asked about. They fired the manual and kept the machine. And the machine didn't know how to run itself. At 9:00 a.m., the board convened. A private call. Executive only. Cameras on. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. People talk. People panic. People forward messages they shouldn't. Word spread fast. The dashboards were still down. The analytics model was outputting zeros. Payroll had glitched. The medical tech client filed a formal complaint. And halfway through the crisis call, Malcolm made a fatal mistake. He opened his mouth. The problem, he said confidently, is the legacy infrastructure. Brenda left it in disarray. Such a predictable move. The board was silent. Then one member asked the question that sent a fracture through the room. If her systems were such a problem, why did everything work perfectly until 36 hours ago? According to my source, Malcolm stuttered. Actually stuttered. Someone else chimed in. Where is the documentation for the new system? Silence. Where is the rollback plan? Silence. Where is the disaster recovery protocol? More silence. Then came the strike that split the company open. Who approved the modifications? All eyes turned to the strategy team. They weren't ready. They never were. Ethan tried to defend himself. We, improved the architecture because it was outdated. Outdated how? The CFO asked. We found redundancies. What redundancies? Dependencies, maybe something like that. Someone else snapped. You disabled compliance routing without consulting legal. Then, you restructured escalation logic without analyzing risk. Then, you broke the client pipeline the week before contract renewal. Each accusation struck in rapid succession. Each one hit its mark. And then the moment I had been waiting for arrived. The board chair, the calmest man alive, leaned forward and said, "This didn't happen because Brenda left. This happened because nobody knew what she actually did." And that is a leadership failure. Leadership failure. The corporate death sentence. Malcolm tried to recover. "We can fix this," he insisted. "We just need Brenda to give us her admin credentials, and we can." He didn't finish the sentence. Because someone on the board asked the question none of them wanted spoken out loud. Why would she help you after you fired her? The room went quiet. Very quiet. And then the chair said, "Find her. Because if we lose the medical tech contract and the Q3 projections collapse, this entire merger becomes a liability." They didn't want me back. They needed me back. The difference tasted like victory. At 10:26 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a coworker. It was the chair of the audit committee. "Brenda, are you available for a conversation today? We need your insight." Insight. That's corporate for. Save our collapsing empire. I didn't reply. Not yet. The first time they called, I let it ring. The second time, I muted the phone completely. By the third attempt, I put it face down on the kitchen counter and kept making breakfast like nothing in the world required my attention. Silence was a language. And today, I was finally fluent. Around lunchtime, my notifications started buzzing nonstop. Not from friends. Not from family. But from the one place that thought I'd run back the second things got messy. Corvix. Suddenly, everyone who ignored me for years had urgent questions, quick favors. Just need your insight for a moment. I didn't open a single one. Then the tone shifted. The messages became shorter. More nervous. Less confident. Things like, "We need your help. There's an issue with the automation workflows. Can you jump on a quick call? Something is wrong with the reporting system." And my personal favorite, "We don't understand how the dependencies were originally structured." Of course they didn't. Because I built it. The whole structure. Every rule, every bypass, every quiet automation they took for granted. They thought I would crumble the moment they pushed me out. Instead, the company was crumbling without me. My phone lit up again. This time from 3 different executives back to back. People who hadn't spoken to me properly in years. I let every call go to voicemail. Meanwhile, texts from former coworkers started pouring in too. They can't get the dashboards to run. Compliance escalations aren't routing. Payroll failed again. Malcolm is yelling at everyone. I sipped my coffee and kept scrolling, calm as ever. Then I got the message that made me laugh, actually laugh. "Malcolm thinks you sabotaged the system on your way out." Oh, Malcolm. The same man who once asked me how to convert a PDF. Now imagined I spent 16 years building a revenge machine hidden under his nose. He couldn't accept the truth. I didn't sabotage anything. I just stopped holding everything together. And without me, everything he bragged about, everything he modernized, everything he took credit for, collapsed exactly the way it was always going to. I leaned back in my chair. For the first time in 16 years, the chaos wasn't my responsibility. And that silence, that was the most peaceful sound I'd heard in my entire career. By Thursday morning, Corvex finally realized something life-changing. I wasn't coming back. Not to fix the dashboards. Not to rescue their compliance. Not to babysit Malcolm's ego. Not to glue their broken systems together with duct tape and caffeine. And that's when things inside the company shifted from messy to full-scale corporate meltdown. My former teammate, Lena, the only decent person left in that building, called me from a storage closet like she was hiding from an active shooter. Her voice shook. "Brenda, you don't understand. The systems are folding in on themselves." I stayed quiet, letting her talk. They tried rerouting escalation tickets manually. Half went missing. Axiom Medical threatened to suspend the entire contract. Malcolm is blaming ops. Ops is blaming dev. Dev is blaming strategy. Strategy is blaming you, Malcolm even said. I cut her off. I know. Because of course he did. Men like Malcolm only take responsibility when they're being photographed. Lena kept going. And the board, they're furious. They called an emergency audit meeting tomorrow. They want Malcolm to explain why every workflow tied to revenue is collapsing. I could picture it perfectly. Malcolm pacing. Sweating. Blaming legacy issues. Pretending the disaster appeared out of thin air. Then came the part that actually surprised me. Legal wants to talk to you, Lena whispered. They said you might be the only one who understands the back-end architecture. Of course I was. They just forgot that for 16 years straight. Did they email? I asked. 4 times. Did they call? 8. I almost smiled. And then she said the line that made me sit up straight. The audit chair asked a question this morning. She said, who approved the restructuring of systems she built? Who signed off on removing her oversight? So the board didn't know. Malcolm never told them he gutted the architecture without a replacement plan. He never told them he removed the one person who understood the system. He never told them his streamlining initiative meant putting interns in charge of million-dollar workflows. And now, the board was awake. Finally, Lena inhaled sharply. And Brenda, one more thing. Malcolm looked scared today. That made me pause. Scared. Malcolm. The man who walked like he owned the air. What happened? I asked. He found out you kept the receipts. My silence said enough. She whispered, almost breathless. They know you have everything. Yes. They did now. Every warning. Every rollback. Every ignored message. Every modification Ethan's toddlers in suits made without understanding the architecture. Every dependency they deleted. Every timeline they lied about. It wasn't revenge. It was documentation. And it was airtight. Lena lowered her voice. Brenda, they're preparing to pin this entire collapse on you tomorrow. They're claiming your legacy systems caused it. My jaw tightened. They really said that. They're desperate. Malcolm's sweating through his shirts. Strategy looks like they're about to mutiny. HR is pretending they never met you. And then she said the sentence that changed everything. Brenda, I think the board wants to hear your side tomorrow. Silence fell between us. I already knew where tomorrow was headed. And so did Malcolm. Where's the meeting? I asked calmly. Main boardroom, 9 a.m. Good. Are you going? I didn't answer immediately. I looked at the folder on my coffee table. 16 years worth of receipts. 16 years worth of architecture. 16 years worth of the truth that survived every bad decision, every ego trip, every cheap attempt to erase me. A slow, deliberate calm settled over me. I'll be there, I said. But Lena. Yeah. Make sure Malcolm sits directly across from where I walk in. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a month. Brenda, what are you planning? I picked up the folder. My voice didn't shake. Tomorrow. I'm planning to give the board exactly what they asked for. A beat. And Malcolm is finally going to learn. You don't fire the foundation and expect the building to stand. The boardroom was already full when I reached the glass doors at 9:00 a.m. sharp. Not fashionably late. Not dramatically early. Right on time, because nothing unsettles guilty executives more than calm punctuality. Through the frosted paneling, I could see shapes shifting. Malcolm pacing. The CFO whispering urgently to legal. Strategy flipping through printouts they didn't understand. Perfect. I pushed the door open. Every conversation stopped. The room didn't gasp, but it felt like it did. 12 pairs of eyes. 12 different flavors of panic. And Malcolm. He looked like someone had unplugged his spine. Brenda, he said, voice cracking just enough to make my morning. We weren't expecting. I know, I replied, placing my folder on the table. That's why I'm here. The board chair cleared her throat. Ms. Reynolds, please join us. I took the empty seat at the table, the one that used to be mine before Malcolm replaced me with his pet consultants. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The chair began. We're here to discuss a series of operational failures and ESCAL. Aiding compliance risks. Malcolm, since you initiated the restructuring, you'll begin. Malcolm straightened his shoulders, put on a weak imitation of confidence, and clicked the remote. The first slide appeared. Operational breakdown, root cause, legacy systems. I didn't react. I just folded my hands and waited. Malcolm launched into his speech, rehearsed, shallow, full of buzzwords he couldn't define. Our older frameworks were inherently unstable. Our legacy tools created bottlenecks. Brenda's previous configurations lacked scalability. Her systems didn't align with our growth strategy. I watched him rewrite history in real time. Arrogance turning into desperation. Desperation turning into blame. Blame turning into lies. He didn't look at me once. He didn't have the spine. When he finished, the board chair said, Ms. Reynolds, would you like to respond? The room stilled. I opened the folder slowly, deliberately, letting the sound of paper fill the silence. I slid the first packet across the table. Slide 1, I said. Let's correct the timeline. The CFO leaned in. The legal officer adjusted her glasses. Even Malcolm's consultant stopped breathing. 3 months ago, I continued, I warned Malcolm's strategy team not to disable the escalation filters. They did anyway. I slid the next packet. 6 weeks ago, I flagged the reporting server dependencies. They ignored it. Next, 4 weeks ago, I notified leadership that their optimization deleted a certificate tied to a $6.03 M client. Then another. And here are the Slack messages, every one of them unanswered. The boardroom was dead silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Finally, I laid down the document that changed the temperature of the room. Assigned approval log. Every modification strategy made. Every deleted workflow. Every overwritten script. Every ignored warning. Signed. Approved. By Malcolm. The CFO sucked in a breath. The legal officer muttered something that sounded like, "Oh God." One of the board members whispered, "He signed all of that." I nodded. They broke the system, I said softly. Then blamed the person who built it. The chair turned slowly toward Malcolm. Is this accurate? She asked. His face drained. This isn't, she's twisting, this is. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I slid the final document forward. An internal memo Malcolm sent to strategy last month. The subject line read, remove Brenda from all architecture permissions ASAP. The timestamp, 1 hour before the worst system failure. The board chair read it twice. Then she looked up. Malcolm, she said, voice cold. Did you restructure the entire operations architecture without consulting the system architect who built it? He froze. A full-body, career-ending freeze. Well, things were moving quickly, we had to modernize, she wouldn't adapt, her systems were outdated. The chair cut him off. Her systems, she said sharply, are the reason Corvex survived the merger. Silence. Then she turned to me. Ms. Reynolds, do you have a recommendation? I closed the folder. Yes, I said. Malcolm leaned forward, grasping the table like a man watching his last lifeline drift away. We can fix this, he stammered. Right, Brenda, we can work together. No, I replied. And the entire room seemed to exhale. My recommendation, I continued, is that someone who actually understands the systems leads the recovery effort. The board chair nodded slowly. And who would that be? I didn't smile. I simply said, I already built the blueprint once. I can rebuild it cleaner. The board exchanged glances, relieved, desperate, pragmatic. Then the chair said, Brenda, effective immediately, you're reinstated as head of systems. Malcolm flinched. But only, the chair added, looking directly at him, if you choose to accept. I looked around the room. At the executives, who had ignored my warnings. At Malcolm, shrinking by the second. At the mess they'd made of a system they never appreciated. Then I said, I accept. The chair nodded. Then Malcolm, she said, we'll discuss your position privately. His face collapsed. The hallway outside the boardroom felt too bright, too quiet, the kind of silence that follows an explosion, not because nothing happened, but because everything did. Malcolm stumbled out behind me, his steps uneven, his breath shallow. Brenda, wait, he said. I didn't. He jogged to catch up. Nearly tripping over the rug, he'd insisted the company order from some overpriced designer catalog. Brenda, can we talk? I stopped. Not for him, but because I didn't want his panic bleeding into the boardroom behind us. They had enough fires to put out. I turned, slow and deliberate. Yes, Malcolm. He swallowed hard. The man who strutted into my department 6 months ago with a $600 belt and an ego to match, now looked like he was watching the ground swallow his shoes. I didn't realize it would go this far, he whispered. That, I said, has always been your problem. He blinked. Confused. Scared. Like a man who'd only now realized that his confidence had been empty calories all along. Look, he tried again, rubbing the back of his neck. I admit we made mistakes. Strategy moved too fast. Maybe I should have looped you in more. But you blindsided me in there, Brenda. You could have warned me. Warned you, I repeated, eyebrows raised. Yes, I thought we had respect. No, Malcolm, I said calmly. You had control, and you mistook it for respect. His mouth opened, then closed again, the half-finished apology of a man who still didn't understand why the building was collapsing. Brenda, please, he tried again. You know the board, if they lose confidence in me, they'll. That's not my problem. He flinched at the words. Like they physically hit him. Is this revenge? He whispered. No, I said. It's accountability. His eyes tightened, not with anger but regret. The kind that arrives too late to do anything but ache. Before he could respond, the elevator dinged. A woman stepped out, board legal counsel, holding a red folder. She spotted Malcolm instantly. Mr. Hayes, she called, we need you back inside now. His face went gray. He glanced at me once more, the panic finally cracking through. Brenda, help me, he murmured. I held his gaze for a long, quiet second. And then I said the one truth he had never understood. You don't ask for help from the person you tried to erase. He swallowed hard, turned, and followed Legal back inside. The elevator doors closed behind him. I exhaled once, long and steady, and walked toward the window overlooking the city. Below me, the sidewalks buzzed with normal life. People getting coffee. Hailing taxis. Checking emails. Not realizing a corporate coup was unfolding 10 floors above them. But I wasn't thinking about Malcolm anymore. I was thinking about the team. The ones who'd been relocated. Ignored. Manipulated. Silenced. The ones Malcolm filled with anxiety while calling it leadership. I knew what would come next: press calls, investor reassurance, internal restructuring. But before any of that, I had one more stop to make. My old department. The place Malcolm tried to bury. I took the stairs, not the elevator, maybe to calm my nerves, maybe because I didn't want to stand still. When I stepped onto the operations floor, 3 heads popped up immediately. Jenna from analytics. Dev from workflows. And Luke, the intern who'd been so nervous he once asked if he needed permission to drink water during meetings. They all stared at me. Not timid. Not awkward. Hopeful. Jenna stood first. Are you back? She asked quietly. For now, I said. Dev let out a breath he'd probably been holding since the merger. Luke practically sagged with relief. Thank God, he said. We've been trying to fix the reporting cluster all week, but everything we touch breaks something else. I nodded. I know. Dev pushed his glasses up. We didn't want to bother you. We thought, Well, we thought maybe you didn't want anything to do with this place anymore. I didn't, I said honestly. But I'm not here for the place. They exchanged glances. You're here for us, Jenna asked. I didn't answer directly. I didn't need to. I stepped forward toward my old desk, stripped, rearranged, emptied, and tapped the surface once. Let's get to work, I said. But before that, tell me everything you've been dealing with. Jenna exhaled shakily. Dev slid over a chair. Luke opened 3 different error logs at once. They didn't look scared anymore. They looked ready. I glanced at the cluster of issues they documented and felt the smallest spark of satisfaction. The system wasn't broken. It was neglected. And that I could fix. But just as we were about to begin digging through the logs, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. No name. Just one message. He's not the only one who signed off on the restructuring. I stared at the screen, pulse steady, instinct sharp. Because that message meant one thing. This battle wasn't over. It was just getting started. The boardroom was silent when I walked back in. No panic this time. No confusion. Only the quiet dread that settles in when people finally understand they've been playing checkers against someone holding the entire chessboard. Malcolm stood near the screen, sweating through his linen blazer, pretending to fix a slide that he still didn't understand. He looked up and froze the second he saw me. Brenda, you're not supposed to be here. I walked right past him. The executives shifted nervously. Because the moment I placed the black notebook on the table, the one holding 16 years of architecture logs, receipts, risk flags, and every warning they ignored, their faces drained white. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. You tried to fire the foundation, I said. So let me show you what happens when the foundation walks away. I and the notebook slowly, page by page. Timeline of failures. Screenshots of unauthorized changes. Dependencies deleted by Ethan's team. Compliance errors triggered by their modern fixes. Slack messages where they dismissed warnings. And worst of all, the emails Malcolm sent approving changes he later blamed on me. The board stared like they were watching a slow-motion car crash. One director finally whispered, This is catastrophic. I nodded. It gets worse. The system modifications you approved broke our regulatory architecture. If the client files an audit request today, you're looking at federal penalties. Malcolm's voice cracked. That's not possible. I slid the last document across the table. The system that could have saved you. The one you called outdated. It never failed once in 16 years. It only collapsed after you touched it. Silence. Then the CFO stood up, shaking. How long until the platform stabilizes again? I shrugged. Depends. On what? He asked. On whether you want me to fix what you broke. I paused, letting the room hold its breath. Or whether you want to watch the company collapse before Friday. Every executive turned to Malcolm. For 16 years, I had been invisible. But right now, every eye in that room finally saw the truth. Without me, the company was a corpse waiting for gravity. The chair leaned forward. Malcolm, he said, voice icy, you withheld critical failures from this board. Malcolm stuttered. No, this is being blown out of context. 2 security officers appeared at the door. The board had already made their decision. Malcolm, the chair said, you're relieved effective immediately. Malcolm backed away from the table, panicked. You can't do this. She's manipulating all of you, But it was over. Security escorted him out while he shouted threats that didn't matter anymore. The door closed behind him with a final, satisfying click. The chair turned to me. Brenda, he said quietly, we need you. Name your terms. I held his gaze. You don't need me, I said. You need accountability. And then I delivered the final blow. I'm not coming back, not for a contract, not for a title, not for a rescue mission. I built this company, you let someone else burn it. The board sat speechless. I gathered my notebook. Walked to the door. Stopped once. You wanted to see how the company runs without me. I glanced at the shattered faces behind me. Congratulations, now you know. I walked out of the building without looking back. The empire didn't crumble because I left. It crumbled because they never understood what was holding it together in the first place. And as I stepped into the sunlight outside, one truth settled quietly in my chest. Sometimes revenge isn't burning the house down. Sometimes it's letting them realize they were the ones who lit the match.